We haven't talked much lately about the proposed Keystone XL pipeline project. For years, it was a flashpoint between governments and environmentalists, oil producers and workers and more, both in Canada and the United States. Remember this?
My view is that you don't take no for an answer.
Well, Canada got a no in 2015 from Barack Obama, who blocked the project. It was to carry crude oil from Hardisty, Alberta to the Texas Gulf Coast. So now that Donald Trump has brought the project back to life, what does that mean for the Canadian portion of the project? Katie Simpson begins our coverage tonight from the Liberal Cabinet retreat in Calgary.
We're going to renegotiate some of the terms, and if they'd like, we'll see if we can get that pipeline built.
And with that, the Keystone XL pipeline was given new life. Donald Trump's administration wants the project back on track as quickly as possible, as long as certain conditions to be determined by the president are met.
If we're going to do all of these things to expedite these projects that go over or under a piece of, U.S. soil, that the American taxpayers considered in this process.
The conditions didn't seem to cause any worry for the Prime Minister and his cabinet.
In both the conversations I've had with President Trump now, Keystone XL came up as a topic, and I reiterated my support for the project. We know we can get our resources to market more safely and responsibly while meeting our climate change goals.
Despite those conversations, no one gave Canada the heads up Trump was making this announcement today. Still, it is a sign of cooperation with the new U.S. administration. But the opposition wasted no time criticizing the plan over environmental concerns.
On Keystone, it's not clear why Justin Trudeau is pushing to revive a pipeline that will export Canadian jobs and has never been properly reviewed.
The Environment Minister says there will not be a new environmental review, even though the project was approved nearly 7 years ago.
This was a decision that was made by the previous government, and now it's up to the U.S. administration.
The next move is up to energy giant TransCanada, which confirmed it will reapply for a permit. If the project gets off the ground, it will be the third pipeline to move forward under the Liberal government.
If you add those jobs to the pipelines that have already been approved, then you're looking at literally 25, 30, 35,000 jobs for Canadians.
Trump's announcement could turn into an economic win for Trudeau. And after the positive discussion Cabinet had with a top Trump advisor at this retreat, it looks like the new Canada-U.S. relationship is off to a pretty strong start. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Calgary.
For a province that has suffered huge blows to its oil industry in recent years, the revival of Keystone XL would have a huge economic impact on Alberta, both in the industry and in spin-off jobs. But some wonder if it will all be too high a cost for the environment. Briar Stewart has that part of the story.
And where does Canada fit in all this?
The timing could not have been better. Today, a Washington-based consultant spoke to Edmonton's business community. His talk entitled, "The Trump Regime, Can There Be an Alberta Advantage?" But even he's unsure about whether Keystone XL will be built.
Right now, I would say probably 50-50.
Will Trump revive the pipeline project? He wants to renegotiate its terms and conditions. What exactly that means is unclear.
TransCanada is going to have to lead this file. It's their project, and they've been working it through the system to this point, and now they've cleared a hurdle. But there's more work to do, no question.
Keystone XL is expected to create a few thousand jobs in Canada and as many as 28,000 in the United States.
That brings about a different level of progress than what we've seen before.
Alberta Premier Rachel Notley says Keystone was never a priority, as her government has been focused on pipelines that would bring Canadian oil to Canadian coasts. But times have changed.
We're not at $100 a barrel anymore. And so anything that will lift that price, that will reduce the differential and get more for our product and bitumen, is something that the economy needs right now.
There will likely be more legal challenges, but this former TransCanada executive believes the project can overcome those.
I believe that the Trump administration would have actually done its due diligence in terms that these executive orders will pass muster against those. But yes, that is going to be a potential that could delay the project moving forward as quickly as possible.
Keystone has been a target of fierce protests.
This is what democracy looks like.
Late today, a few hundred people gathered in front of the White House, and some are wondering just how this new pipeline fits with Canada's environmental goals.
It certainly challenges the credibility of what Canada has committed to in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and Alberta with its climate leadership plan.
Alberta's premier insists that Keystone isn't about extracting more oil, but shipping it more efficiently to the U.S. But there is nothing streamlined about this project's fate, considering that it was proposed nearly a decade ago. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Edmonton.
As we mentioned, Trump also resurrected the Dakota Access Pipeline project today. It was to be built under a Missouri River reservoir near the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. Construction was halted in December. The move was a huge victory for hundreds of protesters who had camped on the site for months. At the time, the U.S. federal agency involved said it would explore alternate routes for the pipeline's crossing. The Dakota Access would carry crude oil from North Dakota to Illinois. The bosses of America's big three automakers met the president this morning. The message from the meeting, no surprise, build more cars in the United States. But what it means for Canada's auto industry is less clear. Renee Filipponi has that story.
It was all about America first and bringing jobs back to the U.S. as President Trump sat down with auto industry execs.
I want to just thank you all for being here.
He suggested ways to encourage U.S. investment, including easing environmental regulations.
He is very focused on policies that will grow investment and jobs.
Also on the table, plans to renegotiate NAFTA and talk of tariffs. And that raises obvious concerns here. What does Buy American mean for the Canadian auto industry?
That says that you want everything back in the States, so what does that do for us?
It's just more adversity for us.
The lack of clarity from the U.S. isn't making it any easier to predict consequences, but history can serve as a lesson.
The U.S. did introduce a Buy America program in the aftermath of the 2008-9 recession, and that did have a deleterious or negative effect on the Canadian economy,
including job losses. The Canada-U.S. auto industries are highly integrated and have been that way for decades. Manufacturers here say any tariff would hurt everyone.
Adding 20% every time it crosses, which on average for an auto part is 6 or 7 times, adds a ridiculous amount of cost.
Auto companies have already committed more than $1.5 billion for Canadian investment during the latest union negotiations. The question now, will that level of commitment continue?
Well, I'm not as concerned about it as others.
The union believes Trump's focus will not be on Canada, but Mexico and Asia. And that's because of cheap labor there and the fact they sell more cars to the U.S. than they buy.
We really do have balanced trade with the United States. We build more cars in Canada than we sell, but the majority of the parts come from the United States.
An aluminum prototype mold that we're building for Jeep.
For this Windsor area parts maker, the most important thing when talking about the future of the auto industry here is Canada an ally or an enemy in Trump's eyes?
I would tell him that the Canadian economy also sacrificed alongside the U.S. economy. So that puts us in the same category as ally.
A lot of questions weighing heavily on a big Canadian industry, as answers and clarity for now seem to be hard to come by. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Toronto.